Hello everyone. As promised, I thought I would do a little update about our kelp crab who molted last week. So last Thursday, Lindsay came into the office and saw what looked to be a dead crab here. And she kind of freaked out for a moment and then remembered, like, oh, it could be just a molt. And sure enough, we looked into the tank further and saw the much larger female kelp crab. So this is the molt. There's no crab in this shell whatsoever. And last week I showed off a little bit of how the crab gets out. So there's a seam right here at the back that pops open. It's dried now so that we can display it. So that we can kind of show off that molt process. It's also hollow and very, very light and pretty delicate at this stage. So I may actually add a little bit of glue to reinforce this. But I wanted to just show you this compared to our female kelp crab. So I've got her in a little touch tank here on my desk. And if she's not feeling too crabby, I can pull her up and show you just how large she has gotten. So there's that little shell. And then here is her much, much larger carapace. And the main thing to note, the biggest difference that I see when I look at this live crab, who's now nice and hard, she's hardened up, she's firm. It takes several days to do that process, so she's safe to handle now. When she first molts, she's soft as a marshmallow and very squishy, and just by gently touching her, I could damage her, so I definitely don't want to do that. But the thing that I notice most is this large abdominal flap. See how it touches the legs and it really kind of swells and fills that whole space on her underside? If we look at our molt, we can see that the molt is a juvenile belly flap. It doesn't quite touch the legs yet, it doesn't bulge outward, and it's changed shape considerably. So this is an immature crab, and now our girl is big and mature. While I was down collecting kelp, this is one of their favorite species. This is bull kelp, one of the kind of the blades or the kind of the fronds up at the top that does the photosynthesis. Bull kelp is hard to find this time of year as it's starting to die back. It's losing its long holdfast here. This is the stipe, the section of the kelp that's going to kind of get them high up in the water. But as I was collecting some kelp this morning, not much of a surprise, there was a large kelp crab feasting on a chunk of it. So I was actually able to bring this fellow up so that we can compare him to our large mature female. I've got them separated with a little piece of plastic here because crabs are crabby and I really don't want them to injure one another. So here we can see the big difference between our mature female and this mature male is in the coloration and in their shape. So these crabs show what's called a sexual dimorphism, where males and females look different from one another. This one here we can see it's got this beautiful red coloration all over. He's very, very strong and holding on to the edge of the tank here. And then these huge pinchers, they are just so large compared to our female. Oh, look at him showing off all those mouth parts. This is fantastic. Crabs have very complicated jaws. They're not like yours and mine where it's just a bony structure that then leads right to the esophagus. Crabs actually have 3 sets of different mouth parts. And they use their very strong pinchers here to kind of cut and break down food into small enough sizes that then the jaws can manipulate it. The abdominal flap on this male is quite small and skinny up the center there because he's not having to hold on to eggs the same way that our female crab does. So he doesn't need that large tail flap to do that. These really big pinchers that we see here are used for kind of defending territory with other crabs, as well as holding on to the females when they're actually in the mating embrace, which is kind of interesting to watch. Okay, their tips of their toes are very, very sharp, as you can see here. Ouch. And while you'll never be bit by a crab, it is very easily to be injured by them. So this is definitely a species I don't recommend that people handle. It is one of the more flexible crab species. So we can see that in our molt here that I posed it so that you could see that they can, in fact, reach behind their head, whereas most of the cancer-shaped crabs cannot do that. Also, when I was collecting food down on the docks for our creatures, grabbing some fresh kelp and mussels, I came across this little teeny tiny baby kelp crab. Now, I can't tell if this is a juvenile northern kelp crab, or to me it looks more like a graceful kelp crab. It's hard to tell at this size until they get a little bigger. Their distinguishing characteristics are kind of the same. But I just thought it was fantastic to show the difference in size, because all crabs begin their life as plankton. So they are drifting around. They start out as these little teeny tiny plankton called zoea, and then as they grow, they're gonna change. They're gonna go through a metamorphosis and transform into a megalops, which kind of looks remotely a little bit like a crab. They have the 2 eyeballs and they have a swimming tail, and then they finally transition to be a full crab-like crab, and they settle to the bottom. So this is probably a newly settled individual. So cool to see. If you have any questions about crabs and you want to post those in the comments, feel free. I'll do my best to answer those. Otherwise, if you want to mention maybe where you're watching from, or if you've ever seen one of these kelp crabs and where, that would be awesome for us to know as well. I'm going to return this little fella here, and we can kind of go back. Maybe we can even look through the glass. Kelp crabs are amazing at camouflage. Yeah, that glare is just kind of terrible. They're really great at camouflaging. Our kelp crab in our tank is a little bit redder than she would be in nature because we have a lot of red algae in our tank, and so her job is to blend in with what's around her, and so that's what she does very well. But we have collected this little bit of bull kelp for her, so she has kind of her natural food source. She will also scavenge and eat kind of whatever everyone else is eating. So when I feed the fish their krill or their mysis shrimp or squid or pieces of fish, she will also eat that. But we like to give her preferred food, which is bull kelp. And she will prefer bull kelp over things like sugar kelp or red or green algae. But she does tend to eat a lot of red algae in our tank. Super fun. Oh, I love seeing who's watching right now, because I can see that Mark Lemon is watching, and I wonder if Mark, are you the same Mark Lemon who was in our Sea Stars and Beyond program? So fun to see these kids as they kind of grow up, and Mark was great at finding crabs. Oh, and we've got Dawn who's watching from downstairs. Dawn is one of our visitor center volunteers, so thanks for helping to man the visitor center down there, Dawn. If that's something, if you're a Gig Harbor local and you're interested in doing, we are accepting new volunteers for that position. So if that is of interest of you, the shifts are 3 hours. It is a lot of fun. You get to talk and kind of hype up our town a little bit, tell people where the best place is to get fish and chips and where to catch the trolley and whatnot. It's really, really great. And the kelp crabs, the males do tend to be larger than the females overall, but mostly the big pinchers is the way to tell them apart. Other things that I've collected in here that are kind of fun to talk about, I grabbed kind of a clump of mussels to feed our sea stars in our touch tanks, and on the mussels are these really interesting tunicates. These are a colonial animal, type of sea squirt, but they live all together. So each little kind of, they almost look like petals of a flower. Each individual one of those is called a zooid, and they live together in colonies, and they will kind of cover over this entire mussels. Next to it, which looks very, very similar to it, but kind of the more wider little section, those are bryozoans. Bryozoans are moss animals, they're called, because they encrust and they don't get very tall typically. And they are also filter feeders. And what's really interesting about bryozoans is that they care for one another. So if one of these individuals is not getting enough food, they actually can take it from the colony, and that's kind of their shared resources there. Super cool to see all these different things. The closer you look, the more appreciation you can get for just how individualized and specialized all these things are. And then of course we have our beautiful kelp crab here. This is a paid actor. I will be paying him in some kelp. And he'll be well taken care of here. Well, thanks for tuning in, everybody. I hope you learned a little bit about our animals here that we have in our touch tanks. You can come visit these at the Skansie Visitor Information Center here in downtown Gig Harbor. We are open 10 to 4 Wednesday through Saturday. So come on down and you can see these animals. Our kelp crabs are not in our touch tank because they're a little too dangerous for that, but lots of other great animals are. So you can come on down and ask questions and touch and get to know some of the animals that are found.